The USC annihilation at Notre Dame doesn't help, but despite that embarrassment, the Pac-12 still playing the best football in college football. Check our conference rankings as the Pac-12 has the best metrics against the other four conferences. But let's get to the power rankings within the Pac-12 right here at the Voice of College Football. Please like, share, subscribe. Here we go. At number 12, we've got Arizona State. The Sun Devils coming in as a 1-5 team, 0-3 in the Pac-12, and they looked completely abysmal early in the season under first-year head coach Kenny Dillingham. The Oklahoma State loss at the time looked awful. Fresno State was that was the bottom of the barrel. That was the low point of the season, 29-0 to a good group of five team, but still a group of five team who loses in shutout fashion these days in college football. But since that, Arizona State has bounced back. They had USC on a one-score game with about 7 or 8 minutes left before losing 42-28. Then they played Cal respectively 24-21. Colorado, they had that game won until a Shadur Sanders touchdown pass late, won it 27-24. Trenton Bourguet in Arizona State's game against Colorado had a 33 for 49 game for 335 yards. The Sun Devils were off this past weekend. They go to Washington, hoping the Huskies are sleeping with a bit of a letdown after their emotional win against Oregon. At number 12 in the Pac-12, Arizona State. Cal is staring at a seventh consecutive losing season under head coach Justin Wilcox, and they are right now 3-4, 1-3 in the Pac-12, and of course, their toughest games are generally ahead of them, although they knocked one off this past weekend in a 20-point loss against Utah, 34-14. There have been some decent spots on the season for the Golden Bears. They did win the cellar-dwelling matchup against Arizona State by a field goal, and they did take Auburn to the wire. Had they made a couple field goals, they missed 3. They would have defeated the Tigers, most likely losing that game 14-10. Otherwise, Cal playing right now with two quarterbacks, Fernando Mendoza and Ben Finley, the transfer. Cal is coming off, this loss against Utah, 34-14. They've got a date coming up in a couple weeks against USC. I'm sorry, Washington Husky fans. If we had a Pac-12 team of the week just out of sentimentality, I think we would have to make it the Stanford Cardinal. But this is not a power ranking based on 1 week. It's based on the season. And hey, Cardinal, regardless of what happens the rest of the season, you may lose the rest of your games to go 2-10. You're going to be an underdog each and every week. Savor what happened on Friday night at Boulder with all the hype surrounding Deion Sanders and the Buffs and Shadur Sanders and all of that and all the celebrities, the packed house, and oh yes, you were down 29-0. In historic fashion, the Buffs get off the deck. Think about how psychologically difficult that is when you get your brains beat in every game. That's happened this year since the Hawaii win in week 0, and that's been going on for the last 3 or 4 years at Stanford. And you've got a first-year head coach who's not won a Pac-12 game, and you're losing to the phenoms of the sport 29-0, and the crowd is roaring, and your confidence has to be next to 0, but they put it all together and put up 46 points, including overtime, to pull out that just incredible upset and stage the greatest upset in the history of Colorado football on the negative side, and Stanford football, most importantly, on the plus side. We all now know the name Alec Ayomanor. 13 receptions, 294 yards to set a Stanford record, 3 touchdowns. Ashton Daniels, the quarterback, 396 through the air and 4 touchdowns. And of course, Ayomanor, it wasn't just the stats, it was that catch of the year against Travis Hunter. Stanford wins in overtime historically. Yes, again, this may be the only high point, but oh, what a high point. Number 10 in the Pac-12 is the Cardinal. So on the other side of that are the Buffs. Yes, they have plummeted all the way to number 9 in our Pac-12 power rankings, and it totally makes sense. Yes, the Cinderella team, the team that was adored by many and still are back in September, after shooting off to a 4-0 start, they are suddenly losing their luster. They were ripped to shreds by Oregon, of course, 35-0 at half. made a comeback to make the USC game look respectable, but were losing by 3 and 4 scores in that game. And then came the Stanford game. The Cardinal had been inept against everybody, and it looked like the Buffs, as a 2-touchdown favorite, would be the latest, would put themselves in position at 5-2 to get to postseason play with another win. Now the Buffs, coming off this historic loss, Shedeur Sanders did throw for 405 touchdowns. Travis Hunter is back. That's a good thing. But the Buffs have a ridiculously difficult schedule to try to get 2 more wins to get to postseason play and complete this Cinderella run. At number 9 in the Pac-12, Coach Prime, talk about a descent. Along with the Buffs, you've got Washington State. The Cougars looked like they could be a dark horse team to make it to the Pac-12 championship game just a few weeks ago, coming off an extremely impressive win against Oregon State, winning that game by 10. Last 2 weeks, though, Cougs lost to UCLA. Cam Ward threw 3 interceptions, less than 200 yards against UCLA, less than 200 yards this past week. But it was more about this. Nakia Watson for the touchdown on the first drive of the game. Cougs up 6-0 at home against Arizona. Tough for those Arizona teams to travel up north in the Pac-12. Pullman, one of the most difficult places to play in the conference. 44 straight points by the Wildcats. Bear down. We should say that later during the Arizona segment. Yes, bear down. Washington State loses 44-6. They fall to 4-2. But man, the way they've looked the last 2 weeks, especially this week, you have to rank them at number 8 in the Pac-12. And next up for the Cougars, they've got a date against Oregon. Ouch. Dante Moore could turn out to be a superstar one day, but for right now, the growing pains are sure hurting UCLA's chances in the Pac-12. Bruins lose to Oregon State 36-24 to fall to 1-2 in the conference. UCLA came into this game number 1 ranked nationally in defense. Now, the defense played okay. They didn't legitimately give up 46 points or 36 points, 415 yards, though, given up in this game. But it was Dante Moore. Wow, he's having a rough time. 14 of 33, 165 yards, 3 picks. And for the third straight game, opening possession interception. For the third straight game, a pick 6. And there are pick 6s, and then there are pick 6s. And that was telegraphed, awful read, bad throw, the whole deal, and that caved in the game. UCLA loses to, again, an Oregon State team by 12, and there are number 7 team in the Pac-12, Bruins. Now we go from the stock market fall to the high risers, and what about this team? One of the hottest in college football, Arizona. Yes, they've only won 1 game in a row, but you got to look a little deeper than that. The Wildcats with Noah Fafita at quarterback, his 3rd consecutive start in replacing the injured Jaden DeLora. They just pummel in Pullman, Washington State 44-6. We talked about that game. Fafita 34 for 43. Brilliant game out of him. Jonah Coleman had 168 yards from scrimmage and 3 touchdowns. But the 2 weeks before that, maybe just as important, as Arizona played within a touchdown of a Washington team that may be the best team in the country, certainly in that top 5 to 10 range. And then they go to the LA Coliseum and take on USC and took them to triple overtime. Those games were clearly not aberrations. Jed Fish says, we're building a special program here. He might be right. It's a little too late possibly to contend for the Pac-12 at 2-2. But man, who wants to play Arizona these days? At number 6 in the Pac-12, bear down. Who saw that coming? Not necessarily that USC lost to Notre Dame. They were a 2.5-point dog, and Notre Dame's an extremely physical team. I know a lot of people across the nation thought that USC's speed and space, and of course Caleb Williams being the best player in college football, would be enough at Notre Dame, but Notre Dame's physical presence. But the way it went down, first of all, it was a blowout, 48-20. It was not close. It was 24-6 at halftime. And then also consider this, that it was USC's offense that let them down. The offensive line couldn't do anything in the run game, could not protect Caleb Williams. He ran around all over the place, and usually when he does that, it's under control and he knows what he's doing, but he threw up 3 interceptions, just ill-advised passes, could have thrown a few other ones. And so the offense really took most of the blame for this one. And it's been the offense the week before against Arizona that helped them to go down 17-0 that really didn't produce against the Wildcats in regulation with 28 points. And so now we've suddenly got a USC defense that's not very good, supplemented by an offense that has questions, that's not functioning despite all the great talent. Zachariah Branch back in the lineup at USC is hurting, coming back home to take on Utah, our number 5 team in the Pac-12, despite an undefeated record and first place in the Pac-12. You got to look a little deeper. It's SC. Cam Rising told ESPN Radio in Salt Lake City this week that his injury going back to last season in the Rose Bowl more severe than he and the athletic department has let on. He described the injury and that even though they were hopeful throughout the season that he would be ready for the opener against Florida and then subsequent weeks, that he still doesn't know when he's going to be back. But he is practicing lightly, and Utah can't wait for him to get back. In the meantime, the Utes stay in the Pac-12 race. They've knocked off some good teams like UCLA, and they also, despite having a loss against Oregon State, are again hanging in the Pac-12 race. But they need this one coming up at the LA Coliseum against USC. And of course, the Utes had the doubleheader win against USC to win the conference for a second consecutive time in 2022. You got Bryson Barnes filling in for Rising at quarterback, 15 of 21 against Cal in a 20-point win. And then you've got the running back, Sion Vaki, 15 carries for $158 and 2 touchdowns for a Utah team that's 5-1, 2-1 in the conference. And again, got to win this one. Don't know that a 2-loss team can make it to the conference championship game. At number 4 in the Pac-12, Utes. I say it time and time again, because of the depth of quality in the Pac-12, there are more numbers of important games and exciting and entertaining games in the Pac-12. And we had one this past weekend that got lost in the shuffle in a certain respect nationally as Oregon State down to UCLA 36-24. The Bruins had the number 1 ranked defense in the country statistically coming into the game. DJ Uiagalelei hit on 14 of 24 for 3 touchdowns. He had 5 TD passes the previous week against Cal as Oregon State amassed 415 yards of total offense. They had 5 sacks against UCLA, 3 picks, including the pick 6 to open up the ball game. Oregon State back on track, defeated UCLA. They're 6-1 and number 3 in our Pac-12 rankings. Then there were 2. Oregon, Washington. They met in Seattle over the weekend. Hopefully you got to see the ball game because it was a spectacle. We expected big things, and the Ducks and the Dogs delivered. Unfortunately for Oregon, Dan Lanning's decisions, you could debate whether they were reasonable decisions or that he went too far in the risk-reward category, but all of his major decisions in this game backfired, including not going for a field goal at the end of the first half, going for a few 4th downs, including the 4th down, and negating the punt that would have pinned Washington possibly inside its own 10-yard line with 2 minutes left as Oregon led by 4 points. He went for it at midfield. It backfired on a 4th and 3. Bo Nix had another outstanding game as you could flip a coin. Consider this. Oregon outgained Washington by 140 yards. I know stats are for losers, but if you watched the game and are evaluating the teams, you could actually rank Oregon ahead of Washington. But we have to credit the win, of course. The game was at Husky Stadium. The Ducks were a 3-point underdog. They did miss a field goal at the gun that had nothing to do with the Huskies playing good football or stopping the kick, but it was just a flat-out miss from 43 that would have sent the game to overtime. Oregon's an excellent football team, both offensively and defensively. Camden Lewis with the field goal miss. We mentioned Bo going 33 of 44 for 337 in this game. They had 32 first downs, and they had 541 yards of total offense. But they lost the game. Number 2 in the Pac-12. Ducks. Then there was one. And that one watched a field goal sail wide right. And they are the winners, and they may have a Heisman Trophy from Michael Penix, and they may win the Pac-12, and who knows, maybe even beyond that. Washington 36, Oregon 33. It's the most important win, possibly in college football, not just the Pac-12. thus far this season. Michael Penix with another strong showing, over 300 yards passing, 4 touchdowns and a pick. It's the number one passing offense in the country. I don't think that's debatable. It might be the number one offense in the country. The Huskies are remarkable to watch with the football in their hands. Rome Odunze, of course, with a remarkable game himself, 8 catches, 128, and the game winner as the Huskies marched 53 yards in 2 plays. It took them 2 plays to end this thing, and then they just held on for dear life on defense. And Washington wins. They're 6-0, 3-0 in the conference. They've got their next date. They can let down and still win easily, you would think, with Arizona State coming to town. Our number 1 team in the Pac-12, Huskies, of course. They're number 1. Oregon's 2. We've got Oregon State at number 3. Our number 4 team, Utah, then USC, Arizona, UCLA, Wazoo. Those 8 teams are quality teams. The top 4 to 5, we'll see about USC, are extremely good, but the 8 are quality. Then you get the drop off to Colorado, Stanford, Cal, and Arizona State. And at one point we would have said Stanford and Arizona State, they're abysmal. They're the worst. But they have shown that they can compete and win against other teams in the Pac-12. Those are our Pac-12 power rankings. It's the best conference in college football until further notice. Best discussion, debate, and analysis right here at the Voice of College Football. See you next time.